Welcome, everybody, to the Relationship Renovation Podcast. I'm Tarah Kerwin.
And my name is EJ Kerwin.
And we're just always grateful to our listeners for all of the amazing feedback and questions and statements that you give. So thank you for listening, for reviewing us. Like, we really, truly appreciate it. And we love the work that we do. And you guys help us even get better at the work we do.
Yeah. And just another reminder that we have this new thing in our show notes. It's through a service called Gala. And if you click in the show notes, like that you want to leave a comment, you can do a recorded comment that then we can put into a show, or you can put a written comment in there. And we already have had a few listeners put in comments.
Ooh.
And it allows us to reply to you. But also, we've been getting some great ideas about new show topics. So please continue to do that. That's awesome.
So let's introduce today, because if you guys have listened to our story, and the reason why we opened up a couples counseling center is because of our own difficult transition into a blended family and having twins who are colic. And you guys know the story. We talk about it a lot. So we developed this program and started taking couples through it. And my goodness, it was really successful. And we didn't know how amazing it would be. And so we have had couples on our podcast that have been willing and brave and vulnerable to share their story. And today is one of those. And I just always feel so proud. And I look at EJ and I feel really proud to know that we've been able to support our own relationship and couples and our therapist here through our relationship renovation program, and then get to hear the story of the healing.
Absolutely. And so today we're lucky once again to have a couple, Chris and Kasey, and they went through a program with one of our therapists a few months ago, and they're just brave and willing to come in and share that story with you all. And so instead of getting into a real deep sort of explanation of who they are, we're going to sort of just, ask them some questions. So welcome, Chris and Kasey.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, a great starting point with us is just telling us a little bit about yourselves currently. Tell us about you, how long you guys have been together, your family, just sort of a little bit about the basics of who you are.
Okay, on the spot. All right, so we are going to be going into our 5th year of being together. And, we're both a little bit older and had numerous relationships in the past. Mm-hmm. And so, when we met, there was a lot of baggage from both sides. And, we entered into this. I don't quite think Kasey was ready for any sort of relationship whatsoever.
It was not.
And to be quite honest, when I saw her, I knew she was the one. Wow. They say people get love at first sight. I had that. That actually happened to me. It had never happened before. Wow. So we met, and I pursued Kasey. She had a large wall set up and quickly told me that's not what she's looking for. And she was into being friends. And so that's exactly what we did. We were friends for the very beginning of our relationship.
Yeah. How'd you guys meet?
Oh, we're both in recovery. So we're both addicts in recovery. And we met through our fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous. We were both in the same meeting together. And I remember when we first met, all I could remember about Chris is his eye contact. Like, he gave really good eye contact, and it made me very uncomfortable. It was almost like he was staring into my soul, and like hearing his backstory to it makes sense because his love at first sight. But so that's how we met, was through a meeting in Narcotics Anonymous. And I was fresh into my recovery. I had maybe 20 something days clean. Wow. And so in my eyes, like, there was no way, like, I was a wreck and I couldn't enter into a relationship.
Yeah, it wasn't even a possibility for you at that time.
No, I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel, ready. It terrified me.
Absolutely.
But he was willing to do whatever it took just to be around me, just to be my friend. Mm-hmm. And we built trust that way.
How long, so were you guys sort of friends for a period of time before you guys got together?
So we've, since day one, we've never separated since the day we met. Weird enough, I have my own company, so I've got a little bit of extra free time, and I can kind of fudge my schedule. Kasey, was new in recovery. So really all she had going on was recovery at that time. So we literally pretty much spent some time every single day together at that point. And, we hung out and spent time together for about a month, I think it was, before we really decided that we were going to have a go at this. Before Kasey decided she was ready to have a go at this.
Yeah.
I was there. Again, it was love at first sight for me. This was the person that I wanted to spend my time with. Throughout that month, Kasey did everything in her power to push me away, tell me every dark, scary, sketchy detail of her life and what she's done and what she's been through. And none of it fazed me at all. It did not change the way I felt about her at all. So it
didn't work, Kasey.
No, I tried.
No, and so it was kind of weird. Kasey was in a situation where she was living with somebody else that was in recovery. That person really wasn't super healthy in that aspect, and it wasn't long. Within a week, things didn't work out there, and Kasey moved into my house with me. Again, we were like, hey, we're going to be friends. I think Kasey's words verbatim were single occupancy.
Like we had pillows in between.
Wow.
I'm in my mid-30s and I made sure we had a pillow wall because I just didn't want to send any kind of vibes. I didn't want to lead him on in any way. I just wanted his friendship at the time. Yeah.
It's so interesting with couples because, we're lucky enough when we work with couples that we hear their stories and how many couples have really, really complicated beginnings, and that the complications sometimes from the very beginning of their relationship, sort of set some tones for some of the complications later on in their relationship.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I have to ask both of you, what was it about the other person that just drew you in and made you, I don't know, kind of take that. It was a very emotional risk at that transition that you were both going through, and your patience, your willingness to put down the walls, probably slowly. But what was it about the other person?
For me, it was just divine intervention. I just knew that was the person. It wasn't the way she looked. It wasn't the way she spoke. It wasn't the way she carried herself. It wasn't how crazy her story was. It wasn't, hey, I want to try to fix her. It was all of her. It was just simply her. None of it mattered. I felt so comfortable being around her. That was it. It's never been that way before with me.
They say it's like this feeling of when you meet that person and you just know this feeling of home that you've never known before.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, it was his willingness to accept my boundary because this was the first healthy relationship that I've ever had. And so I've expressed those types of boundaries in prior relationships and was never granted that. And so he was totally willing and ready to just be whatever role he could be to be in my life. And so I was able to build trust and see that he was genuine.
Wow. No strings attached, no sense of I'm being manipulated.
He allowed the space.
Yes. He never pressured me. Sleeping in the same bed together for weeks, he never once, slipped a hand or did anything to make me feel uncomfortable. And I believe that's what helped us grow closer.
The word that comes to me right now is just protection. Somehow you guys met at this perfect time and felt protected and supported.
Yeah.
And here you are 5 years later sharing your story with us. Okay.
So how did it evolve? How did your relationship evolve once you guys sort of started crossing into an intimate relationship?
Very dysfunctionally.
Yes.
It was, unbeknownst to us at that point, or to me at that point, right? All I ever knew was dysfunctional relationships that I'd had in the past and the dysfunctional relationships I watched my parents have. That's all I ever knew. I never knew anything any different. So to me, that's what was normal. That's how life went. That's what a relationship was. Being, an addict in recovery, well, there was a time where I was in active addiction. Those relationships were just manipulative, a disaster, no responsibility. And I was a little bit different at this point, but my views on relationships weren't. I had no idea.
Yeah, no, totally. So I would immediately, like, we would get into these arguments and I would immediately sink back into the old person that I was with other relationships, and I would scream and I would yell, and then I would want to run away from him. I would want to immediately like disconnect. And then we would try to work things out, and it was just like this roller coaster of highs and lows and it evolved into that very quickly.
Which sort of like mirrors like addiction, right?
Yes.
That like, there's extreme highs, there's extreme lows, there's very little of that middle middle ground.
It was like a constant relapse into negativity. And then for me, I was always able to get over it, let it go, and move on. Kasey not. She internalized all of that because I don't know why, but Kasey had this huge wall, this gigantic wall, because she had to protect herself from the outside. And I knew that wasn't the real her, right? So we worked on trying to slowly break down that wall. But each time we would go into one of these massive disagreements that turned into a huge fight, boom, all the bricks would come right back up. Yeah. And the wall was there again, right?
It was just rinse and repeat, kind of like that
same.
Yeah.
And Kasey, you probably just, piecing together what you're saying about your prior life, you've probably been defending yourself
absolutely
forever. And so it was like that was just like the natural way to go about it.
Yeah, it just felt safer for me to put those walls up. And like one thing I will say is being in recovery, we work kind of similar to what we learned when we started coming here, but we work a 12-step program. And so we're constantly writing and digging deep into ourselves. And so I believe that that's what kept us together, or kept me there, was I was constantly learning new things about me. And instead of saying something is wrong with him, I was realizing that I had a lot of work to do, and that really there was nothing wrong with our relationship. I just needed to learn how to be okay with myself so that way I can interact with him better.
But that you took that direction instead of, right? That probably was a point where relapse was probably, it could be very easy or look really like, okay, here we go again. Like, why am I doing this? But instead you chose that I call it like Braveheart, like you're going to go in with your freaking sword and you're going to be like, what is all this shit? And you're going to just go through it, even though it's super uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
So was there a final thing that happened that brought you guys here? Or like, how did you guys decide to start couples counseling?
There was a lot of things that...
Yeah. So me having been involved in criminal activity, I had a hard life, man, as I was younger. I did spent a lot of time locked up. I was the offender for a long, long time. I had been in recovery for about 5 years when Kasey and I met. So things had changed for me. I learned how to be accountable, right? But I still didn't know anything about a relationship. And that's the bottom line. I had no clue. Kasey finally at some point suggested we should probably do some counseling. And I was like, absolutely not. I've spent all my life in counseling. I'm in a 12-step program that fixes everything. In hindsight, a 12-step program fixes, if you work it correctly, will fix your problems. It has nothing to do with our problems. But I didn't know that at that point. My thought, and a lot of folks in recovery, the belief is, those 12 steps you can implement into your life and everything, and you certainly can. I would never take that away. Now that I have found out that if you can implement professional people into a we problem, it's a lot easier to be able to sort those issues out. But I was all against it. 100%. No way am I doing that. I've done that. I've talked to shrinks, wardens, counselors, all of the above, and it's never helped. The only thing that's ever helped me was Narcotics Anonymous, and that's where I'm going to stay.
And he was against it, but yet at the same time, right, which is what was so troubling for me and left me feeling lost and unsure of what our future was. When we would get into these all-out fights, he would immediately want to leave. Like, he would think our marriage was over. And so it was like, well, we can't just keep going through this, and we can't just keep saying that you want out of this. We're either going to stay in it and we're going to figure out how to be in it, or we're going to be out of this.
This what we're doing right now is not sustainable.
No.
Cannot handle this anymore.
So this is I think a really a good thing for listeners, because very often in heterosexual relationships, it's the female who wants to get into therapy, and very often it's the male who has a lot of apprehension around it. How did you get Chris to buy in? Like, how did you nudge him, into a place where he was willing to give it a shot?
Because we were literally like at a point in our marriage where it was just, we were both kind of feeling done. But at the same time, he knew, and I could tell he knew that we weren't done.
Yeah.
Right? Like he got to a point where he was finally like, okay, let's try it. He was very skeptical of it, but he was willing to give it a shot. And so I was like, cool, and we tried with another therapist, and it was very
uninteresting.
Yeah.
Boring.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uninteresting.
Yeah. It just
very monotone.
It was not what we needed.
Yeah.
We didn't know what we needed, but we knew that was not it, right?
Yeah.
In fact, recovery offered us more than what
Yeah.
this person was offering us at that time. So I think we did 3, maybe 4 sessions.
And we didn't finish. We paid him in full. But
and we paid him.
Oh,
And we were
shit,
like,
that
look, man,
sucks.
like it's not that we're fighting over it. It's just,
It's just not doing
it was
what we needed to do.
We had a hard time sitting through it.
yeah.
Yeah.
We weren't very interactive.
Yeah. That's an important thing for people too, is that like sometimes we approach mental health like we do like doctors, where it's like we pick somebody and we feel like we're stuck in it, even if it's a crappy experience. And having that like sort of wisdom that you guys had of like, okay, this isn't us.
Yeah,
This
you have a
doesn't work.
choice.
I got to go out and shop and find something else. So you found our program, and was it quickly like, oh, wait a minute, this is a little bit different? Or,
Yes.
yeah, what was your experience like entering into it?
So again, I had some skepticism for sure, but I really dug our therapist. She just seemed, on both of our sides. Like she was just there to listen to what we had to say, right? And she was easy to talk to, right? And so, I felt good when I came here. I felt comfortable. And it's like in Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and I usually take everything in my life back to that, because that's where
It worked. It
it's
changed
where
your
it
life.
changed my life. And so I left here feeling better than I did when I walked in the door. For me, that's a win. In any way you look at it.
One of the things I hear often is, because we have a pretty structured program here, yet every couple is very different. And the idea is structure, right? When we think of parenting, when we have kids, like structure provides safety for kids. And the structure we have, because it's not a cookie cutter approach, but there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, and there's all that work in between. And that creates the safety of the therapeutic process, because if you don't have structure, it's like, I know it. I've been a marriage counselor for 20 years. Like couples come in, they vent, they leave, they get a couple coping skills, and they come back and they vent and they leave. And so
It's like your weekly
so
bitching
for us,
session.
that, our 18-week, 22-week, whatever, some couples are here for 56 weeks. It doesn't matter. It really provides the safety, which then helps internalize the safety within the relationship, which is where all of the work can be done.
Yeah, and what really turned me on was we like immediately jumped right in with like homework, but it was like where we were in every morning checking in with each other, every night. It was immediately helping us to get connected. Something we hadn't been, that I didn't realize we really weren't connected until we had these assignments, and we were enjoying doing them. At first it was almost like verbatim, and we were just going through the motions, and then we started to really get into checking in with each other, and I felt heard, and I was able to hear him, right, which was new for me because it was always his fault in my head.
Right, totally.
And to be able to hear him and hear his struggles and be like, oh, and then at the end of the day to hear how maybe he turned that around. Like it was just, we were immediately immersed into being connected to each other, and that really turned me on a lot.
For me, one of the most profound things I feel like EJ and I did to develop the program was to really focus in the beginning on the genogram and your early childhood attachment and how that plays out in intimate relationships, that you're in now, because it's like we get into this like defending ourselves from our partner, but it's really like we're defending ourselves from what we had to when we were younger, and we don't even know how to separate it, and that this person is not our family. There's someone outside that we want to feel really loved and supported by. But a lot of us don't have the understanding of how our early childhood attachment, our negative core beliefs, how we learn to look at the world, bam, gets projected onto this partner. And if we didn't have a loving, nurturing environment, it's not going to look pretty.
So I think you hit the nail on the head. That's absolutely right. We were so very fortunate and, in my opinion, ahead of the game, having worked 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous, knowing character assets, knowing character defects, right? Being able to be accountable for ourselves. Like we already could do that. We knew that instead of, it's all you, it's all me, it's all, we knew all of those pieces. We just weren't sure how to put those pieces together, in my opinion.
Well, and I feel like we're good at figuring out our defects, but like being able to, for me, like I learned about him, his childhood. I learned that offender role that he grew up with. That put a whole new light on it for me. So like when he would act out in those ways, right, that he had learned from childhood, I was able to be a lot more understanding and empathetic towards him instead of just being, God, here we go again.
I have goosebumps right now only because I know how much that process builds compassion.
Yeah.
And so many couples come in and they just want to talk about like, no, this thing happened. We have to talk about it. And I'm like, you have to wait and trust this process because you will not get anywhere because there's no compassion here right now. So you have to sit back and let the therapist kind of guide you until that compassion builds through that process, like you just said, Kasey. Oh, goosebumps.
Kasey really had to learn that compassion. Kasey's one of her things that she overcame, in my opinion, that was gigantic, that was a game changer, was stonewalling. When we learned what stonewalling was, and Kasey learned that was how she coped with my behavior, right? Once we learned what that was, she was able to identify and start to change that. A lot of times it's like, hey, what's up? Are you okay? What's going on? And she's like, I'm fine. I know that she's not fine, right? I know that. But she's going to say that because that's comfortable to her, right? Once we learned that, she began to change that. And I would say what's wrong, and she would certainly tell me what's wrong,
I started to feel safe, right? That he would receive what I was thinking or feeling. I started to feel safe because he said to me in session, he said, I promise that if you tell me what's wrong, I won't react in a harsh way. Yeah. So I took a chance and I did that, and I was received with love and empathy.
What gave you that ability, Chris, to receive it and not react to it and not take it personal?
So it had to be here, and I'll tell you why. All good things come from the bottom. And so we came in here and we went straight down to the bottom. And we went to a point where at one time in the session, I had to get up and leave because we were at that point where I was reacting, she was upset, and we weren't working together. And I ended up getting up and I left. And that was the changing point, in my opinion, in this whole process. I left, I went away, Kasey stayed. And I thought that, oh my gosh, this is going to be a rough day when she gets out of there. Yeah. And when she came out of there, it wasn't a rough day. She talked about it and said, hey, look, I get it. I know why you had to leave. It was best for us. And we talked about me, and we came back the very next week, and we began to build up after that. Yeah. So
was that the messy middle?
I feel like it was.
There's a process that most couples go through. It's called the messy middle. And it's like the point where you think you're never going to come back and it's done. And I'm like, and I tell all of our couples in the first session, I'm like, it's going to happen. 80% of the time it happens. And that is the moment where like the shift happens.
Yes.
Totally.
And so I'm going to remind you, when you don't want to come back here, I'm going to remind you of that first session. And I say, this is going to happen. It's like the system starting to shift, but at an unconscious level, we don't want it to, because this is where we were safe. So there's this push and pull, and then usually a big moment happens. And then it's like, you guys came back to each other.
It was incredible. I remember I went home and I messaged him and I was like, I said, I apologize for my part in it. And then I said, you know what? Can we start over? Like, let's not rehash it. Can we start over? And then he didn't respond, but then he showed up at the house like 5 minutes later. And I had this anxiety of like, is it going to be like the old, you know what I mean? Is this going to be a fight? And he walked in and he was like, yes, let's start over.
You know, what's interesting is because earlier you said there was this dynamic where when you had big arguments, Chris would bail, but you were doing it before just on your own, you know, and trying to figure out your way through the maze. But because it happened in a therapeutic environment, in a therapeutic process, it gave you like a way to start doing things differently. Because that's the biggest thing with couples is we're like, hey, like those old systems, they're not your fault. You both brought all this baggage in together. You created new baggage together. You created systems to deal with it, but they're just not working. So here, let us help you figure out a different way to do it. And so what shifted after that between the two of you?
So growing up in jails and institutions, the fight or flight response becomes upfront in your world every single day, right? It was always fight. There was never flight. You don't do that. And that's not, so it was always fight for me. Fight. Didn't want to do that with Kasey. So when I got in recovery, I learned you don't have to fight all the time. You can walk away. You can get away from it. So flight became my safety valve, right? Yeah. Get away from that. Well, after having gone through some sessions and learned some therapy, you really don't have to fight and you really don't have to run away. Yeah. If you can simply sit down, calm down, and talk about things and own your own side, things can work out. And that's where it changed. Yeah. The fight or flight response is always there, but doesn't have to be used. Like you don't have to live that way. And so it changed, man. It changed the way I looked at life.
Well, a total shift, right, for you, because it was like, actually, I can be safe. I can be in uncomfortable moments, and it doesn't mean I'm not safe anymore. That this person actually can hold a space for me where I'm not at threat for my life.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Which isn't it bizarre, though, that we get into a situation where we think this person who you were crazy about, you loved, you thought everything was perfect about her, on some level, that she felt unsafe for you for years?
That was learned behavior. I learned that from my parents. I mean, as far as I knew, they were a loving couple and they were a husband and wife, and they would yell at the top of their lungs and throw things. And I'm like, well, the cops were at our house twice a week, that was normal.
That was just normal.
I'm like, well, the cops aren't coming, so I guess we're doing pretty good.
One of the big things I heard you say, Chris, is that your central nervous system was in a state of hypervigilance. Often, and that somehow you were able to get your nervous system to relax and have moments with Kasey where instead of going into that hypervigilance, you were able to and that creates new neural pathways when you get your central nervous system out of hypervigilance, right? And so now it's that's what builds safety, because if you weren't able to do that, we're constantly in flight, fight, freeze.
Equality was a big part of that too. Equality.
Help us understand that. What do you mean?
So in my past, I was always the one that was right. It was my way or the highway. All of these cliches, right? Once I learned that I can give Kasey equality and she is just as right or just as wrong as I am, and it's okay to be that way, we were equal in this whole situation because she's taken her part of responsibility. I'm taking part of mine. That's an equal, amount. And so we had equality in this thing anymore, right? It wasn't one's right and the other one's wrong, or one's better and the other one's less than. We were equal. That was a big takeoff as well, because I think that helped her realize she is safe in this. Yeah. She has a say.
I did. And that wasn't a big turning point for me. It was once I started to feel heard by Chris, then it helped me to have more empathy for him and what he's gone through in his life. It was hard for me to do that because it was always his way or the highway, right? And so why would you want to have empathy for somebody who's like that with you, right? And once I started to feel heard, then I'm like, you know what? Yeah, that feels really good to feel heard. And now I'm going to hear him, because I want him to feel good as well. Because I never took into account that he had feelings too, right? Because he was just such a tough guy.
Absolutely.
And so it started to, that was it. Yeah, I believe that was absolutely when my shift started happening, was once he started practicing that with me, then it felt good for me to practice it right back.
Well, okay. So what I'm hearing is you got to a point where you were actually able to stay together in uncomfortable moments. You began to feel safe. And so that's the beginning where you can build from, right? Because that's the baseline that we want to get couples to. So once you get to that place where it feels like, oh, actually this is safe, actually we can stay together in uncomfortable moments, what did you guys begin to build on top of that foundation?
So we learned how to disagree, healthy disagreement. It was cool. She had an opinion and so did I. And again, we were now equal. So her opinion was just as valid as mine was. And so it's cool to disagree. It's cool. You think that and I think this and it's okay. And we move on. We don't have to have a war about it. It doesn't make any difference, right? We learned how to disagree on things in a healthy manner.
Right. And this didn't just come overnight, right? Like obviously we had some setbacks or some things going forward, but then in the workbook, right, we learned how to take space from each other. And then when we're taking space, the biggest part that I learned was because, you're typically like, oh, he did this, I can't believe I can't. But then to learn, where did my behavior stem from? Right. And because we had a couple, one in particular was where we were driving home from a road trip and he had some road rage in it. And I freaked out on him because I was terrified. And he got offended thinking I was sticking up for the other person in the other vehicle. And so we got home and we just took space. And then I started thinking about it. And I was like, why was I so crazy about that? And then it hit me. So I went out there and I told him, I said, the reason I behave that way is because I'm terrified if some psycho shoots you, pulls a gun out and shoots you. And I don't want to lose you.
Oh.
Right. And so, and that was a big thing for me, was realizing I don't want to lose the man that I love. And so I was able to express that to him. And then he was able to hear that and he was able to apologize. And so we were able to move through that.
Yeah.
What a big shift too. Like for you, like it's not that she sees me as a bad guy. Like probably a lot of people have seen me as a bad guy. It's actually that she just like is crazy about me and loves me.
It was over fear.
Yeah. She didn't know how to get to that place until you knew to shift. I'll never forget the moment that happened in our relationship and the exercise we developed because of it, the cognitive restructuring technique. Like, what is the belief under this that is causing me to act this way?
Yep.
And it was like, oh God, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Right.
And then they can hear it. You can come back and say it because it's about me now. It's not about you. And then the partner can be like, well, I'm still mad anyway. That usually doesn't happen. They're like, wow, thank you. Wasn't my intention. I don't want to hurt you. But we get to know each other more and it's okay because we're going to hurt each other throughout our lifetime.
Absolutely. Do you guys remember, if you're willing to share, like some of your primary negative core beliefs that were affecting the relationship that you weren't totally aware of?
I mean, me thinking I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
That's been a thing throughout my whole life. It's just not feeling worthy or good enough, I'm a very insecure person, or I'm a lot better now. Yeah. But not feeling worthy or good enough.
And mine was the lack of equality.
Yeah.
I mean, I was simply just raised, by watching my parents, where my dad ran the show and my mom did what she was told. That's just how it went. And I just didn't know any better. I mean, I had no idea. And that's not how life is. It's not how a healthy relationship is.
Well, it's almost like that you don't feel safe unless you're in control.
Total control.
Yeah,
That was a big part of it, being in control. And that's something I've worked on a lot throughout my recovery, is relinquishing control. It doesn't always have to go Chris's way, and I've learned to be quite honest. If I start stuffing my will into things, usually they don't go the way they should.
Darn it. It doesn't work.
It's not working. So
Wow. And how did those two things interplay? Like, I'm not worthy and I need to have control, which is really on some level like I'm out of control. Or I don't have control, right? How did those two things like tweak each other?
Well, I think that, by giving Kasey control of the situation, she realized she was worthy to be able to handle this stuff, right? She can do this. Yeah. She can make those decisions. She doesn't need me to make those decisions. Yeah. And she went ahead and did it, and it worked out really well. Yeah. And that's how I saw that.
Gosh, and for you, Kasey, like I imagine, like how many times in your life did you feel like an equal with people?
Not a lot, not a lot. A lot of times, and I when I was in my active addiction, I led a lifestyle where I kept myself from being hurt by men. And so it was a very detached situation of how I lived my life. So that way I wouldn't allow them to hurt me, because in my eyes, they were all out to hurt me. Which is what made it difficult when we first started dating, was because in my head, like, he wanted one thing and one thing only from me. You know what I mean? He just wanted to use me. And then he proved to me, and this was pre-therapy, pre-coming here, he proved to me that that was in fact not the case, right? And that was the start of me feeling worthy. Yeah. So this is, like I said before, this is the first healthy relationship that I've ever been in.
Chris had a huge smile on his face when she said that. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's the first healthy relationship I've ever been in either. I've never felt closer to another human being in my entire life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it takes work. It takes a lot of work. I mean, it doesn't just stay that way. But I have to say, like, we get through our tough times a lot better than we used to.
Yeah.
And it keeps getting easy. I mean, like, EJ and I still have our tough times, but we have all of the it's like you have to learn the skills to do it, or it's just we don't.
And you have to practice them.
Yeah, you got to keep using them, right?
Yep.
And it's so, because, our chalkboard out there says our partner is can be our greatest teacher. Be patient for the lessons. It's so true. Like,
yeah, because we don't want to hear more like, God damn it, like, would you freaking just stop doing that?
Yeah, we recently went through an extended period of time that was probably one of the hardest times in both of our lives, and being in a relationship. And through a relationship renovation protocol that we've learned and we've used, we went through it pretty well with grace. I mean, it was really tough. There was a lot of self involved in the whole situation, but Kasey and I learned how to be able to cope with that and walk through it with very minor disagreements on the whole situation. Where, to be honest, had we not walked through this, we would have probably been hands up and walked away, because there were times I felt that way at times, but I just simply didn't do that because of what I'd learned.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's the huge fork in the road for couples, is when you do the work that you guys did, those side winds that inevitably come, that screw us up, that create big disruptions in our life, instead of them fracturing us, they actually, like, they bring us closer together. And it's beautiful, right? Because you want somebody by your side in these horrible times. You don't want to be alone. Yes.
And you also need people to hold you accountable. Like, Kasey does not co-sign my bullshit. Bottom line, she just won't do it. And I need that in my life. I mean, I really do. And so
we're in each other's care, right? We are all in each other's care.
Yes. Well, and learning how to support him when he's struggling or wants to vent or whatever, but not feeding into it. Like, I listen. I've learned to be a good listener.
Yeah.
But if I don't agree with what he's saying, I don't have any input. And then I don't offer my input, though, also, unless he's like, "So, do you agree?" And then I'll be like, "Well, since you're asking, no." You know what I mean?
Right.
But just learning that difference instead of
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's this. It was Michael Singer. He's an author of The Untethered Soul and a couple other books, which was amazing. But he uses this term "heart with ears." And it's like, I think of that when I'm listening to EJ and I might not agree with something, but it's like my heart is open and it's got ears and I don't have to respond to this unless he says, "What is your opinion?"
Right.
But that was like a huge change in our communication, just like knowing that I can listen with my heart open and I can feel the moment it's like starting to shift. And that's when I take my little burnt toast code word, take a time out for myself. But I have just realized I've used burnt toast significantly less.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good. Okay. Holidays are coming. I might use it more.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and tell me if you guys agree with this, is that also we can't have the expectation from each other that just like, oh, you're done. You fixed that part of yourself that's problematic in our relationship. Is that those things, what I do, how I withdraw and go inward and judge and all those crappy parts of myself, I can't just extinct them, that she kind of has to deal and help me continue to move forward in that those things that are baked into us at a young age, they stick with us.
I think character defects.
I was going to say that same thing.
Definitely are prevalent, and you find new ones all the time as we grow, as people. We're taught, we write them down. I mean, there's steps where we write these things down and we talk about them. And some go away, but they're replaced with other ones.
Or they'll creep back up in certain situations.
Correct.
You'll
Totally.
notice.
Yeah.
I know for me, I just came off of a very extreme training program for some competitions, and my character defects, like my insecurities or my short temper, like things creeped up that hadn't been present in a minute. And that's what he was talking about earlier, as we went through that and him having to deal with me. Like he has mentioned since my competitions are over that I was very condescending, and he was just kind of like not reacting because he knew that wasn't me. Like I was just mentally in another space. And so to have that brought to my attention and be like, okay, now I have to be aware that I'm not treating him in a condescending behavior, because we don't do that anymore.
Wow.
Do you notice when Kasey is being really tough on herself
Yeah.
that ups how tough she is on you?
Kasey is very tough on herself because she is a hardcore competitor. Like myself, we both compete in different facets. She's a physique and bodybuilder, and I race dirt bikes. So we're hardcore competitors, and so we are equally hard on ourselves. And I think that no, she's not harder on me when she's hard on herself. She's focused on her, and that's okay. That's what builds a competitor.
But it will affect my mood.
It definitely affects her mood.
It'll ruin a day.
Yeah.
It'll ruin my day.
For her. I don't allow it to ruin my day because it's for her. And I get it, right? There's no more like, you're going to act like that, it's going to ruin our day.
Right.
It doesn't work that way anymore. It certainly, I thought it had to, but it doesn't. It's cool.
Yeah.
And throughout this prep that Kasey had was 20 weeks, I'm a real happy-go-lucky, joking, fun-loving, game playing. It continued like that. And I could tell there were times she was just like, oh
It
my
took
God.
all my energy to put a smile on, because
yeah.
I knew he was trying to do that for me.
She was just like, take your little elf games and go away. But she dealt with them, right? And I stayed happy through it. And it was, a bummer sometimes that she wasn't there with me to be able to do it, but I understood.
But you know what the feeling is like, we can be whoever we need to be, and it's freaking K.
Mm-hmm.
Done and done. I am loved unconditionally for who I am, no matter what, and it's okay.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah.
That's secure attachment right there.
Oh,
That's
I agree.
secure functioning. This is where you guys move from a place of probably anxious, preoccupied, avoidant to secure functioning. And it does. It takes a minute. And it takes practice, and it takes using the skills, and it takes making repair attempts over and over and over. But you guys have gotten there.
Yeah.
What words of wisdom would you guys give to a couple that's struggling right now? Because a lot of couples are struggling right now, and a lot of couples that listen to this podcast struggle.
I would say give it a chance, give it a shot. I mean, go for it. I put it in the words of recovery, but relationship recovery, relationship renovation. It is possible, doable. It will happen if you are willing to put in the work. Make a decision. Don't keep doing the same things over and over again. You're going to get the same results. We already know that. Do something different.
Yeah.
Well, and for me, I say time takes time. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't happen overnight, and you may not even notice it at first. But if you just keep implementing the tools, and if you just keep trusting the process, the changes are going to happen. And it's just inevitable if you are actually being mindful about the process. Time just takes time, and we are proof of that. I mean, it hasn't even been a year since we first started here, and we've made so much progress. And so as long as we keep going, I can only imagine how much stronger and closer we're going to grow.
When you do this as a couple, you emulate success and you emulate love, and our kids see that. They see that. They're not seeing what I saw as a kid.
Yeah.
And I am so forever grateful for that, for coming here, because our kids see what it is really like, how awesome having an amazing relationship is, right? I mean, it's huge. It's great. And one other thing I just want to add to that is Honesty. People think and believe that they're honest all the time, and they may very well be to everybody else around them. But you have to step back and be honest to yourself.
Absolutely.
That's a huge part of it. You have to be honest to yourself. And when you can do that, you open up for honesty for everyone else.
Wow, that's amazing. So one final question for you guys. What do you believe about your relationship now versus what you believed about your relationship a year ago?
I believe that we are extremely connected, and I believe that there's compassion and empathy in our relationship, which I didn't believe that at all. Like, I mean, I believed that I had it, but I didn't believe he was capable of empathy and compassion. And that is absolutely not true. Like, he is one so compassionate man. And it's I get emotional thinking about that because it's beautiful. Like, I just thought that wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
And it is.
That's awesome.
I think that I have found the person that has taught me how to be honest and how to, be me. I don't have to be anybody else. I can be Chris, and I'm accepted as Chris. I don't have to pretend that I'm someone else. It's huge. I've learned how to treat my wife with total respect and listen to her, and it feels real good to be in this together as an equal. I feel much stronger as a unit than I ever have as myself.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to ask, and I'm sure you know this, so at the end of all of our couple sessions, we ask partners to just look at each other and just say one thing that they appreciate about the other person.
Okay, well, I appreciate your drive. I appreciate your ability to be such a strong person, and I appreciate you being able to guide me. Again, not co-signing my stuff and keeping me in check when I really need it. And I appreciate your love and understanding.
I love you. So I appreciate your willingness, because in the beginning of all this, you were not wanting to. You were just begrudgingly showing up, and you became willing. I've appreciated your transformation. I've appreciated how you have I don't want to say you changed, but it's almost like you dialed in and you dug down deep and you found the parts of you that had been hidden for so long. I mean, you are the most amazing listener, and you're so compassionate, and those are some of my favorite things about you. And so I appreciate you. I love you.
I love you.
Thank you guys. This was just amazing to hear you guys' story and to have your, that bravery to like just be vulnerable in this way and to go through the process that you guys went through together. And it's just, it's amazing. Honestly, on a selfish side, it's just like gratifying to know that somebody walked through these doors. We've never really met, and to see like that it made this shift between the two of you. And like you said, it affected your kids and what they're seeing. So thank you for sharing, man. Thank you.
And I appreciate your story very much, and the hard work you guys continue to put in to be in recovery and to build emotional safety and secure functioning in your relationship. I know how hard it is to do that. And also just trusting our therapists here and our center and our program that it could make things better. That is like our passion and why we do what we do. So thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts.
Yeah, thank you. And I just really quickly want to say thank you for being out here and doing what you are doing and sharing your success with this community. Because, if people are out there listening to this stuff, give it a chance. Give yourself a shot and come out and try this, because it can change your life if you're willing.
Absolutely. It changed ours.
Well, thank you guys, and thank you everybody out there who's listening. We know that when people do what the two of you have done, it makes this world a better place. The kids that we interact with benefit from it. The people we work with benefit from it. Everybody in our community benefits from it. And it just reverberates. It starts with 1, 2, and then it just like ripples out. And that is, that's why we do it. That's what we want to impact the world.
All right. So thank you again for being here, Kasey and Chris. What a beautiful story of healing and survival and bravery. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. We all deserve to feel loved and accepted for who we are.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Me and you just singing on the train. Me and you listening to the rain. Me and you, we are the same. Me and you have all the fame we need. Indeed, you and me are we.